Memo 001, September 3rd, 11:47 p.m. recording started. Okay, I don't know why I'm doing this. I read somewhere that talking out loud, even to yourself, even to a phone, helps you process things that your brain keeps circling without landing on. And my brain has been circling something for 3 weeks now, and I would really like it to stop. So here we are. My name is Maya Chen. I am 26 years old. I have just moved into apartment 4B on Callaway Street, and I am recording this at nearly midnight because the man in the apartment below mine is watching something that makes him laugh at random intervals, and the sound keeps coming up through my floor, and I keep stopping whatever I'm doing to listen for the next one. His name is James. I know this because the building manager mentioned in it when she showed me the apartment. James in 3B is very quiet. You won't have any trouble. And I filed it away the way you file away information that seems irrelevant. He is quiet. I have not heard music from his apartment or loud phone calls or parties. What I have heard on 4 separate occasions in 3 weeks is his laugh. It's not a polished laugh. It doesn't seem designed for anyone else's consumption. It's the kind of laugh that comes out of a person when something genuinely gets them. And it always comes in a short, surprised burst, like he wasn't expecting to find something that funny. I met him in the elevator on my 4th day here. He was holding a paper bag of groceries and reading something on his phone. And when I got in, he looked up and said, "4th floor?" And I said yes, and he pressed it for me without making a production of it, and that was the entire conversation. He has dark eyes and the kind of posture that suggests he spent a lot of time thinking about things rather than performing about things. And he looked at me once, briefly, with what I interpreted as polite acknowledgement, and then looked back at his phone. That was 3 weeks ago. I have thought about it an unreasonable number of times since. I am not developing feelings for my downstairs neighbor. I would like to be clear about that. I have too many practical concerns right now. The new job, the unpacking, the fact that I still don't have curtains in the bedroom, to be developing feelings for anyone, let alone someone I share a building with, which is the specific domestic proximity that makes everything complicated if it goes wrong. I am simply observing that he exists and that his laugh is good, and that on 4 occasions it has come through my floor and interrupted my evening in a way that was not entirely unwelcome. Recording ended. I'm going to sleep. I'm not going to think about this anymore. Memo 002, September 9th, 7:23 a.m. recording started. I spoke to him this morning. In the lobby, he was checking his mail and I was checking mine. And we were standing 3 feet apart. And I said, "Good morning." And he said, "Good morning." And then, "This is the part I want to document accurately." He said, "You're the one who moved in upstairs." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "How's the apartment treating you?" And I said it was good, that I was still sorting it out. And he nodded and said, "The hot water takes longer than it should to get warm in the morning. Give it an extra 30 seconds before you get in." And I said, "Thank you." And he said, "Of course." And that was it. He went out the front door, and I stood in the lobby for an additional 4 seconds before I went back upstairs. He remembered which apartment I was in. He knew I was the one who moved in upstairs, which means he registered that information at some point and retained it. I am not reading into this. People know who their neighbors are. That is a normal thing that happens in buildings where people are not entirely isolated from one another. What I am noting, simply as a factual observation, is that he remembered and that he offered me practical information unprompted, which is a small act of neighborly consideration. Also, the hot water thing is completely accurate. 30 seconds makes a substantial difference. I tested it. I have started to notice the pattern of his days. He leaves at 8:15. He comes home between 6 and 6:30. On Saturdays, he goes out earlier, around 9, and comes back with a farmer's market bag. I have seen him in the lobby twice on Saturday mornings, and both times he had that same reusable bag with green handles. He plays music on Sunday evenings, something instrumental and low, and it comes up through the floor just enough to be present without being intrusive. It is, objectively, the ideal amount of music from a downstairs neighbor. I am not cataloging this because I am interested in him. I am cataloging it because I am a person who notices patterns, and this building is full of them, and James in 3B happens to have a particularly consistent one. Recording ended. Memo 03, September 17th, 9:51 p.m. Recording started. Something happened today that I need to talk through. I had a bad day, the kind that starts badly and accumulates, each small thing adding weight to the previous one, until by 6 p.m. you are carrying something considerably heavier than a single bad day. The new job is harder than I expected. The team is fine, but I am the newest person there, and I make small mistakes that I then replay in exhausting detail for the rest of the day. I came home and sat down on my kitchen floor, which is something I do when things feel like too much. The floor is just lower than everything else, and somehow that helps. I was sitting there for maybe 15 minutes when I heard a knock at my door. Not my apartment door. The building's shared laundry room is accessible from a door at the end of my hall, and I had left a load of laundry in the machine that morning and completely forgotten. The knock was James, standing in my doorway with my laundry basket, which he had apparently moved from the machine to the basket when he'd gone to do his own, and he was holding it out to me with the specific expression of someone who has not fully considered how this encounter would go. He saw my face. I had not. In the transition between sitting on kitchen floor and answering the door, done anything in particular to present a functioning version of myself. And my face apparently communicated something accurate about the kind of day I'd had. He didn't say anything sympathetic. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just held out the laundry basket and said, "I moved it so it wouldn't sit in the machine. I hope that's okay." And I said it was and took it and said thank you. And he said, "Rough day?" And I said yes. And he said, "There's a place on the corner, the Thai place with the yellow awning. They do a soup that's genuinely medicinal." In my experience, I ordered the soup. It was genuinely excellent. I ate it on my kitchen floor because I had not yet moved from there, and I thought about the fact that he had moved my laundry for me without being asked and recommended soups, without making it a thing, and I felt, in some particular and specific way, slightly less alone in this city than I had that morning. I am not falling for my downstairs neighbor. I want to be very clear about that. I am simply grateful for small human kindnesses, which are not nothing, particularly when you are new somewhere and the days are hard. The soup was good. That's all this is. Recording ended. Memo 004, October 1st, 6:14 p.m. Recording started. We have been talking. I should document this because I suspect I will want to remember when it started. And it started on September 21st, when I passed him in the hall. And he had a book under his arm that I had read 6 months ago and which I had strong feelings about. And instead of doing the polite thing and saying nothing, I said, "That book is going to do something to you." And he stopped and looked at it and looked at me and said, "I'm on chapter 4. Something is already happening." We have been talking about it in the hall since then, in the specific way of two people who have identified a mutual thread and are pulling it carefully. He reads quickly. He has opinions that are precise and interesting, the kind of opinions that seem to have been arrived at through actual consideration rather than habit. He said, at one point, leaning against the hallway wall with the book in one hand, that he thought the central love story was really a story about two people choosing each other every day against their own natures, and that the tragedy was that one of them stopped choosing, and the other one didn't notice until it was too late. And I said that was exactly right, and I'd thought about it for weeks after I'd finished it. And he looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as pleased. The way someone looks when they say a thing they've been holding and someone else confirms they weren't wrong to hold it. He is a structural engineer. I learned this on Thursday when I asked what he did, and he explained it simply and without self-importance, and then asked what I did. And when I told him I worked in UX design, he asked genuinely good questions about it, the kind that suggest he was actually listening to what I'd said, rather than waiting for a pause to say something about himself. We talked for 20 minutes in the hallway, 20 minutes leaning against opposite walls like two parentheses around a sentence neither of us had written yet. I noticed things about him that I did not intend to notice. The way he asks questions like they actually matter. The way he is present in a conversation in a way that most people are not partially there while also thinking about something else, but actually there, attending. He remembers things I mention. I said once, casually, that I missed a particular coffee shop from my old neighborhood, and 3 days later, he left a note in my mailbox, an actual handwritten note on a small piece of paper with the address of a place nearby that he said reminded him of what I described. Just that, the address, and in case he wants to see if it's any good. I went. It was very good. I sat there for an hour and tried not to think too specifically about what it meant that he had remembered and done that. I did not succeed entirely. Recording ended. I'm still not falling. Memo 005, October 14th, 11:23 p.m. Recording started. Okay, I need to be honest with myself about something. I have been using these recordings to convince myself of things that are becoming increasingly difficult to convince myself of. And I think the honest thing, the thing I would tell a friend, the thing I would gently insist on if a friend were doing what I am doing, is that I should stop performing certainty I don't actually have. I am going to describe this evening without the conclusion already written. Last week, James knocked on my door at 7 p.m. and asked if I wanted to get dinner at the Thai place, just the one on the corner. Nothing formal, he was going anyway. I said yes. We sat across from each other at a small table for 2 hours and talked about everything. His family in Portland, my family in Vancouver, the city we had both ended up in by a series of decisions that seemed individual and turned out to be directional. He told me about a job he had before this one that had paid very well and made him miserable, and the year he spent figuring out why he was willing to trade happiness for surety, and whether he was still that person, and the specific ordinary Tuesday when he decided he wasn't. He said it without drama, without making it a monologue, just as information about the shape of his life, the way you tell things to someone you trust. He talked about his sister, who is funny and difficult, and his closest person in the world. He talked about the kind of life he was trying to build, quietly, without grand gestures, just with consistent choices that pointed in the right direction. He asked me about mine. We sat there until the restaurant was half empty, and a waiter was doing the thing restaurants do when they want you to notice it's late. And we walked home side by side, and it was a cool evening, and our arms kept almost touching, the way bodies do when they're near each other, and the sidewalk narrows. At the front door of the building, he said, "Thank you for coming." And I said, "Thank you for asking." And we stood there for a moment in that particular way, the way that happens before something, or instead of something. And then he said, "Good night," and went up the stairs. And I went up the stairs after him, on legs that felt like they were making a decision I hadn't yet consciously signed off on. His laugh just came through the floor, It makes me want to know what he's watching. It makes me want to be in the room where that laugh comes from. I am fully aware of what that means, and I am choosing, just for tonight, to sit with it honestly instead of recording myself out of it. I'm falling for my downstairs neighbor. I've known it for a while. I'm just writing it down now. Recording ended. Memo 006, October 21st, 8:42 p.m. Recording started. There's been a development. Hold on, there's someone at the door. 4-second pause. Okay, that was James. He was at my door, holding 2 cups of coffee from the place around the corner, the good one. And he said, I was getting one anyway, which is the exact thing he always says when he does something. Considerate and doesn't want to make it into a thing. And I let him in, and we sat on the floor of my living room because my sofa has not arrived yet. It's been back ordered for 6 weeks, and we drank the coffee, and I told him about the project I'm stressed about, and he asked the exact right questions, the ones that helped me think more clearly rather than just reassuring me. And then he said, very quietly, almost to the middle distance rather than to me directly, I think about this, us talking, whatever we're doing, more than is probably appropriate for a neighbor. And I said, I recorded a voice memo about 2 weeks ago where I admitted I was falling for you, and then told myself I wasn't going to think about it anymore. And he turned and looked at me, and then he started to laugh, his real laugh, the one I'd been hearing through the floor for 2 months, the one I would now recognize anywhere. And he said, a voice memo. And I said yes. And he said, that is the most you thing I can possibly imagine. And I said, well, I'm a very organized person and I process out loud. And he said, still smiling, Maya, would it be okay if I stayed a while longer? I said yes. He's still here. He's reading on the other side of the living room floor while I'm recording this. He doesn't know I'm recording. Or maybe he does, and he's being polite about it. Either way, he's here, and the apartment feels different with another person in it, specifically with him in it, warm and present and entirely himself. And I think this might be the last memo I record about him, because I'd rather just be in the room with him than documenting how I feel about being in the room with him. I think that's the right call. Recording ended. I still have all 6 memos. I listened to them again recently, all of them in order, from the first one where I was absolutely certain I wasn't falling, to the last one where I was recording a memo while the man I love sat on my living room floor and read while I talked to my phone. What gets me is the quality of the certainty in that first recording, how completely I believed what I was telling myself. How honest the performance of not feeling was. I don't say that to be unkind to past Maya, who was doing her best and was genuinely afraid of getting it wrong. I say it because I think that's how it works when the right person arrives. You spend a period of time being very sure about something, and then the certainty starts leaking, and eventually you are sitting on the floor of your own apartment, listening to the laugh you've been, memorizing for months coming from the actual person, right there, and the most efficient thing you can do is tell the truth. The sofa arrived, by the way. Eventually. It's a good sofa. James helped me carry it up 3 flights of stairs and then sat on it and said, I think this is better than the floor. It is, but I still have a fond feeling for the floor because that's where we said the thing out loud. And some places hold the weight of what happened in them forever. Thank you for listening to these memos with me tonight. I hope, wherever you are, you have someone worth recording about. And I hope you have the courage to stop the recording and just be in the room with them. Good night.